Good afternoon, and welcome to the July 6th Safety Commission meeting. We'll call this meeting to order here. First order of business here, we'll have the Secretary's report. The minutes from the May 4th meeting were in the packet. Everyone have a chance to look them over, and any comments, changes, or otherwise a motion to accept them?
I make a motion to accept them.
I want to make sure I've looked through them all. Are we talking about what's on the iPad here?
The minutes from the last meeting.
Okay, I just read those. I have a couple questions. When they say these duties, I'm just curious what that means. Where the Secretary, Engineer Stadheim proposed to the Commission that city staff perform these duties.
Secretarial duties.
Okay. Okay,
Yep, so staff would be taking the meeting minutes.
got it. Then I'll second it.
All right, a motion and a second to accept the minutes from the last meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, the next is old business, Center Street and Garden Street intersection study update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. We have Bolton and Mink here with us today to give an update on the study progress and share some treatments that they've came up with. So I'll turn it over to Jake with Bolton and Mink to give the presentation.
All right, thanks, Joe, and thanks, members of the Safety Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to present here. I don't know if I'm in the mic enough, but yeah, so today I'm here to talk about the Center Street, CASA 13 and Garden Street intersection study. So we've been completing work on this intersection over the past few months and are here to share an update really on our study process of what we've been doing to really dig into the details of the intersection and look to establish some recommendations of improvements that could be provided for that intersection. So just a general overview of what we're planning to talk through today. So hit on some existing conditions, so what we've seen and what's kind of leading us to what aspects we're evaluating to kind of understand what our recommendations will be at the intersection. We have completed some public input for getting some feedback from the community at this intersection as well. So we'll share some findings from that, talk through some traffic forecasting, alternatives analysis, and then work our way into next steps. So this is a pretty data-intensive presentation, so there are some tables I'll probably just touch on, little pieces here and there on, but please feel free to stop me, ask questions. I don't know if that's the format of this, but I'm happy to respond as we go here. So from an existing conditions perspective, one thing we like to do is do a good field observation before we start to develop alternatives, so really understand what the issues are at the intersection. And we know the busiest time out here is that morning peak, so when the school traffic is coming in and out. So we wanted to make sure we hit it during school traffic or school times, and then also during that school opening time. So we were out there on May 3rd from 7:15 to 8:15 a.m. And you can see the little cars on your screen. We did observe some queuing at the intersection, and hopefully this is indicative of what you all see on a normal basis. But so northbound on Garden Street, about 7 vehicles queued up in the left through and the right lanes there. Southbound have four vehicles or so queued up, and then those left turn lanes on Center Street also having a few vehicles queued up, just waiting for gaps to enter onto the side street. During that field observation too, we wanted to take a look at the existing conditions, or looking at some sightline reviews at the intersection as well. And really what we saw, we did some sight triangles that we have there, and that's really based off of the average vehicle speeds approaching the intersection and how far a person could see down the line to safely enter the roadway from the side street. And just dropping down to the street level right there, you can see that there is some concerns with sight lines when you're coming off of that southbound Garden looking east into town there. Just those large, nice, mature trees in the boulevard can cause some issues for people seeing approaching traffic. So we'll get into the crash history at the intersection. It's not a huge problem per se with what we're seeing from results, but just something that we noticed when we were walking around the intersection and looking to see what was happening out there. So part of our existing conditions analysis too, we wanted to dig into some of the data that we collected, and one of those aspects is vehicle speed. So with Garden Street being a stop-controlled intersection, people approaching from the side streets need to come to a stop or a near stop before entering. So we weren't overly concerned with their speeds, but wanted to get a handle on how people are approaching the intersection and exiting the intersection on Center Street. So east of the intersection, 30 miles per hour speed limit. The average speed is 31, so people are traveling about what the posted speed is, but the 85th percentile is 36 miles per hour. Just for some context, the 85th percentile speed is typically, I guess historically, what speed limits have been set off of. So that is kind of changing in the industry a bit, but from a speed limit standpoint, usually what's posted on the speed aligns with 85th percentile. So if MnDOT were to come out here and do a speed study, it may be posted as 35 miles per hour. Center Street west of Garden Street, so as you climb more up the hill, that speed limit's 30 miles per hour also, average speed of 35, and 85th percentile is 40. So people are traveling on average about 5 miles per hour faster, which it's a little bit more wide open of an area going up the hill there. You have the signal just to the east at Payne, which may influence some speeds as well, but just from a distribution standpoint, we do see higher speeds to the west of the intersection.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So with that, is that just for an outlet?
Go to a microphone.
Mr. Chair, members of the council, my name is Dave Borkert. I'm the chief of police for the city of New Ulm. When you're figuring that average, was that just for 1 hour, for the 1 hour you're there, or how did you gather the estimate?
So we put radar counters out there over an extended period of time. So it's a few days that it collects the data, and this is just the average from that data that we collected.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, so in addition to speed and our observations, we also collected or reviewed crash data and provided on MnDOT's website. And at the intersection, we looked at data from 2018 to 2022, so the previous 5 full years of data. And at the intersection, you can see the little crash diagram there. It has the direction and the type of crashes that occurred, but we had 5 right angle crashes and 2 left turn crashes for a total of 7 crashes at the intersection. And that critical index is noted as 1.08. And what the critical index is really if that's above 1, that's saying that the intersection is operating outside of expected range for similar intersections across the state. So this would indicate that there are more crashes at this intersection than a conventional intersection that's like this. So below 1 would be operating below, or within expected range. From a traffic operations standpoint, so we take the data that we collected. So we did collect turning movement counts at various parts of the day, and we did model those for the AM peak hour, which aligns with the school opening, the PM or the evening peak, as well as the school dismissal time. And just to get a full range of understanding of what the operations were at this intersection. And overall, the intersection functions pretty well, just because, or the overall intersection level of service, because the majority of traffic doesn't need to stop at the intersection with it being side street stops. So all the vehicles on Center that are just going straight through have essentially 0 seconds of delay as they just proceed through the intersection. So a lot of time at these side street stop locations, we like to look at how long the side street has to wait, just because those vehicles need to make their own decisions on when they feel an adequate gap is available to enter into traffic. And as longer they wait, the more impatient we get. So that's one movement we like to monitor, just to make sure that they're not waiting for an extended period of time. And what we saw at this intersection is during that AM peak hour, during that school drop-off time, vehicles coming out, you saw those 7 vehicles queued on that northbound approach have about a 30 seconds of delay per vehicle when trying to enter in the roadway. During all other hours of the day, we looked at, during the other peaks, so during the school dismissal and PM, there may be some other movements that were upwards of 20 seconds, but the worst was definitely during that AM peak hour with people exiting. Yeah.
Is LOS A, LOS D, LOS C, is that just a description, or what does that mean?
Yeah, so that's level of service. So that's how we really classify if delay is acceptable or not. So a lot of times, level service A is pretty much no vehicles have to stop for long at the intersection. It's 0 to however many seconds, 5 seconds or so. It really depends on the intersection treatment. But at level service A means people are getting through the intersection pretty well. B and C also identify that same thing. As you get to level service D and E, it's kind of like grades in school too. The higher you get, the worse it is. So D and E is starting to fail, and level service F is a failing movement. Did that answer the
Yep,
question?
thank
Okay,
you.
great. Yep. Thanks for asking it. And then as part of this analysis too, we also wanted to look at Payne Street and Center Street, just with that signalized intersection being so close to Garden Street. And we knew the intersections may impact each other if delays or backups become long enough. And overall, we're seeing that intersection operates quite well as well. So level service A or B, so that's functioning pretty well during all peaks. And individual movements don't exceed 25 seconds of delay. And that's mostly a product of the signal timing that's at the intersection, that it might hold the side street a little bit longer just because there's a more prominent through movement.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have they checked the, when it says 30 seconds of delay during the AM peak hour? I have sat at that intersection trying to turn left on Center, and boy, I think it's a lot more than 30 seconds. In the afternoon, you've got all the kids kind of coming out at the same time. In the morning, it's a little bit more intermittent.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if you want to do a test on that, because in the afternoon, it's way more than 30 seconds.
And we can look at that. I know at times there are peaking characteristics. So with schools, it can be tough to model a little bit just because everyone floods out at the same time. And I know we did take a video of the intersection. So this is the average delays that we're seeing. So I guess there could be some times where it surges for certain times. And I think that's something that's good to note, just to make sure as we design the intersection, we know it can accommodate the larger vehicle movements, but at times it's tough to really design for those 5 or 10 minute, 15-minute peaks. Otherwise, we'd have some big facilities all over the place just accommodating for a very little amount of time.
Because the buses are going through there at the same time.
Yep. Yeah, you're exactly right. So you're right. So there are probably times where it does get far greater than this, but
Good point, though. It's just a couple times.
we'll
Yeah,
get that
during the
noted
day.
too. So thank you for that. So as part of the analysis too, we also look at warrant analysis. So this is industry guidance that we have that looks at the amount of conflict at the intersections with vehicles on the main line and side streets, and it helps us to get a good understanding of what if a traffic signal is warranted or needed at the intersection, if an always stop is warranted or needed at the intersection. And what we're seeing based off of the existing traffic counts we took is that signal warrants are not met at the intersection of Garden and Center Street, and always stops is not justified as well. So that's just based off of the counts that we completed at the intersection. The Payne Street and Center Street intersection has similar volumes to Garden Street, but just with the amount of pedestrian traffic crossing the street at that location, there is a warrant that digs into the amount of ped activity around the school. And with that, it does meet the warrant 5, I guess, to provide a signal at that location.
There is one at that location.
Yep, exactly.
Does the grade of the hill have anything to do with the decision that an always stop would not be justified? Are you just going by the amount of traffic, not so much the gradient of the hill?
So signal warrants and always stop warrants do require an engineering study as well. So what we're reporting here is just strictly the volume-based aspect of it and the pedestrian activity part of it. We'll get into those details as we go and talk through some of the recommended concepts that we looked at as part of it too.
Okay.
All right, then equally important at this intersection, we want to make sure we have a good understanding of what pedestrian traffic is at the intersection and how many peds are crossing here. We did collect pedestrian counts, and you can see on the left side of the screen there. So eastbound is the west approach, or the west leg of the intersection. So these are daily counts at 23 pedestrians. The east leg had 10 pedestrians. The north leg had 25 pedestrians, and that south leg that aligns most with the school had 54 pedestrians on the day that we counted out here. So pretty busy pedestrian movements overall. If you compare that to Payne and Center Street intersection, it actually has, I believe, a couple of more pedestrians crossing through this intersection than what we saw at Payne and Center Street, but they are pretty comparable in levels in that regard. And one aspect that we wanted to look at as well is the pedestrian level of service. So just like how we talked about how easily and how long a vehicle needs to wait at the intersection, we do the same thing for pedestrians and look at it based off of it's how many vehicles are on the roadway. So it calculates the number of gaps that are available for a pedestrian to have a safe gap to walk across, how quickly they walk across, how many lanes they need to cross, what that crossing distance is. And tries to calculate out how difficult it is for a pedestrian to cross the roadway with that current side street stop, since it's an unprotected crossing of Center Street. And as you can see there, we have a lot of level of service Fs, so failing grades there. And it takes upwards of anywhere from 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes for someone to find a safe gap and cross during those peak conditions. And hopefully that kind of checks the box. I know we did some tests while we were out there doing our field observations as well, but by and large, it just shows that it's a difficult intersection to cross as it sits today. So then digging into the public input, so kind of covered all the existing conditions piece of this. Public input, so what has the community been saying? So we have a web-based application called Input ID that it's GIS-based, and really you can just scroll into the intersection and it gives a little bit of background information, and you can drop a pin in and provide a comment. We had good responses. We had 14 individuals comment on the intersection and provide some notes, and 69 replies, which is a simple thumbs up or thumb down reaction to what was being said. Some common themes that were shared as part of this were safety. There was a general consensus that safety improvements are needed for both pedestrian and vehicles, especially during inclement weather, as you mentioned with the hill. Traffic, some residents reported concerns about a signal or a roundabout causing traffic backups on the hill, which would create a new safety concern. So there that is again. And then signal and roundabout. So 62% are in favor of signal or a roundabout at the intersection, 38% are not in favor. So a few other items that were discussed were possibly considering a pedestrian bridge or tunnel. I think we just noted that it can be difficult for pedestrians to get across, so that was a comment from the public. And then whether there was any opportunities to divert traffic from the intersections with turn lanes, new connections on roads, things like that, just to lessen the overall need or importance of the folks to get through that intersection. I'm cruising here, so feel free to interject if you have questions. So moving on past the public engagement, we also took a look at traffic forecasting. So we want to make sure the improvement that we put out there isn't just satisfying today's requirements, but it's built for the future too. We don't want to be short-sighted because these investments do last 20 plus years when they are constructed. So we want to make sure that the right decisions are made. So we do that by looking at historical traffic data available through MnDOT sites and other locations. And you can see the numbers on here on each of the different legs. There hasn't been a ton of growth out here on the south leg. We did have about a 1% growth rate, but overall it's been 0.25% up or down. But just in order to be conservative, just with potential development in the area, maybe there'll be some development further out within the county or within the region. We just applied a 1% growth rate per year for the intersection. And you can see, so right now, the average daily traffic, that's the ADT numbers today. I'm colorblind, apologies, I think that's green. It's anywhere from 4,000 to 6,500 vehicles per day on the leg, and we're anticipating growing it to anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000. So not too significant a growth, but we want to make sure we understand what happens to these recommended improvements and proposed improvements with future growth as well. And what we're seeing, and it's probably pretty intuitive, but at Garden Street and Center Street, operations worsen with higher volumes. So as you get more traffic on Center Street, less gaps are available for people to enter in, and you're also introducing more vehicles trying to enter in from the side street. So overall, the intersection still operates pretty well during peak hours. Just again, given a lot of through traffic just gets to pass through the intersection uninhibited. But the side street lefts and through movements coming from that northbound approach, again, have 60 to 90 seconds of delay. So that's increased from what we talked about before with those 30 seconds of delay during that AM peak hour. And during the school dismissal period, have an average of 40 seconds of delay. So really starting to see it become more difficult for people to enter onto or cross Center Street from Garden with the extra traffic here. Payne Street and Center Street with that traffic signal, that's built to better handle higher traffic volume, so that one continued to function pretty well, even with the growth that we were seeing along the corridor. So then digging into some alternatives. So talking through this a little bit on what we saw from existing conditions. So the intersection is currently operating above expected range for crash safety, or for safety at the intersection with the crashes that we've seen. Folks are having some difficulties getting on from the side streets. So we want to dig in and looking at, and pedestrians are also having difficulties crossing. So we want to look at some improvements that could help kind of accommodate and remedy some of those issues that we see at the intersection. A few of the items that we wanted to look at first and at least acknowledge as part of the existing conditions of the corridor of the intersection are that this is a skewed intersection. It can be difficult for vehicles to make turning movements, and that's why you see that westbound free right that's present there. That is just so trucks and other vehicles can easily make that movement. So that's something that we need to consider here too as we look at our intersection options. Limited right-of-way is provided in the northwest and southeast corners in Harmon Park in the Brown County Human Services. You can see those black parcel lines really get pretty tight to the intersection there. There's a significant grade drop in the northwest corner of Harmon Park as you get a little deeper into the park. As I mentioned, that existing free westbound right turn, and there is a unique situation with a residential driveway located off of that as well. And then the intersection itself is a transition point from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. So you have two through lanes westbound and a single through lane eastbound. So all things that we need to consider as we look at our concepts here and how things really fit into the intersection. So digging into the alternatives, the first one that we wanted to talk through is the mini roundabout. We'll be talking through mini roundabouts, full roundabouts, and then traffic signals as well. We'll just start with the mini roundabout here. So you can see how that fits. It does push a bit. You can see those black parcel lines. Again, I'll pop up one here. You can see where those are at in proximity to the roadway. And then if you look where that retaining wall is and those trails, you can see that footprint does start to expand from what that existing intersection is today. But we are able to avoid private property impacts in that northeast corner, we'll call it. But overall, it fits somewhat decently. 95-foot inscribed circular diameter, so that's ICD. So if you can see that arrow there, that's really from curb line to curb line. That'll help kind of explain how big these roundabouts are compared to each other as we look at the full scale roundabouts. But you can see on that westbound approach, due to that skew, if we were to try to make this a conventional mini roundabout, we would have to make that inscribed circular diameter upwards of 200 feet, so double the size of the roundabout. So we kind of like the idea that you guys have currently there with that free right, so we thought we'd maintain that, and allows us to keep the actual intersection smaller with the mini roundabout, but still accommodate that treatment there for that westbound right turn.
Are semi trucks that are coming down the hill able to negotiate a roundabout?
So the idea with the mini roundabout is, do you guys have any mini roundabouts in? Okay.
It'd be similar to the roundabout that's at Oak and Highland by the high school, so it'd be fully surmountable, so.
I mean, just because of the speed they're gaining coming down the hill.
Yeah.
So the design speed of a roundabout is typically anywhere from 15 to 25 miles per hour. Just because of the size of it, people need to slow down to negotiate it. Excuse me. So they should have clear sight lines to the roundabout, and they should know what's coming. So the idea and the hope would be that they slow down on approach to the roundabout and then navigate it in a way that's safe to do so.
On Icy Hill?
That would be the idea. Yeah, I think those truck drivers, I mean, they drive in these conditions
Drive
quite
like
often.
Over the top of them.
What's that?
They mostly drive like over the top of them.
And yeah, and the semis, they would. So I guess that's where I may have misspoke. So the semis and buses are able to drive and drive over that surmountable median. You hope they can navigate it as best they can, but just with the truck trailers, just how it tracks across, they would likely need to cross over it. Hopefully at a slow rate of speed. And then with this, that driveway is still positioned there off of that free right in the northeast corner. And in general, you'll see some similar costs between the two mini roundabout alternatives, but we do have a price tag of $1.7 million on that one for construction costs. The second option is a second mini roundabout. You can see this is actually an ellipsabout. So it's kind of squished a little bit, and what this allows us to do is help accommodate those truck movements. It looks incredibly unconventional when you look at it overview. If you did find a couple in the field, they do look more normal. But with this, you can see westbound coming into the intersection on Center Street. Now that we no longer have that free right, we just have one entry lane into the intersection, and because of that, we need to find a good place to drop Center Street westbound coming in, and there just really isn't room to taper folks in to come in, so we would likely drop that up to the intersection at Payne, and just have that be an exclusive right, or trap lane of sorts for that outside lane, and then that single lane would then go through into the intersection.
You're talking about that big green area that, we're talking about the,
Right by the house. That's what she said.
so there wouldn't be access to that driveway anymore?
Well, the access is right here now,
Sure.
so he has to come around the roundabout. and
Thank
then
you.
go in here, But then he comes out that same stuff.
Do you want to hear me cough the whole time?
Yeah, there's no soft right here anymore.
So yeah, that driveway then is just accommodated off of Garden Street on the north side. And then that existing free right is just turned into just a nice green space. So we also looked at a full roundabout. So as I mentioned before, so that mini roundabout had a 95-foot inscribed circular diameter. This one's 130. So I'll scroll back so you can see about how far that infringes on Harmon Park. Oop, I went the wrong way. Not complete apples to apples, but you can see the tree there kind of behind that sidewalk area. So we are impacting that a bit more, but still it does fit relatively well. There would need to be some right-of-way needs with the Brown County Human Services building, but it's just a corner for a sidewalk. And there would be some retaining wall needs in order to make this work, as we talked that kind of steeper drop off into Harmon Park. Again, just with the skew of the intersection, this would have to be an incredibly large roundabout if we didn't maintain that free right. So similar discussion as the mini roundabout, we would look to maintain that free right there as well. And the cost with this one, just having it be a larger size, a little bit larger retaining wall as well, just as we push into Harmon Park, is 2.4 compared to the 1.7 of the mini roundabout. And then again, with the ellipsabout of the conventional roundabout, that is not surmountable. So again, this one is 130 by 190, so this is getting to be a pretty good sized roundabout. But similar to the other ones, single lane coming in to the intersection, and we would have a drop lane again at the intersection to the east at Payne.
I can't imagine a pedestrian trying to cross any of these roundabouts because the traffic just keeps moving. How do you accommodate the pedestrians?
So there's actually, MnDOT has done a lot of study in recent years just to answer that very question regarding pedestrian safety at roundabouts versus signals in other locations. And what they found is roundabouts are incredibly safe for pedestrians. And the reason for that is the level of exposure that they have to vehicles is pretty minimal. And I'll zoom in on this one. With a single lane of approach, as a pedestrian enters the intersection, sight lines are great, so the driver can see the pedestrian standing and waiting there. And that the pedestrian's only responsibility is to look one direction, so they just have to look left as a vehicle approaches. They make sure that vehicle stops, cross into the through. There again, they have a safe refuge where they can just stand there, wait for someone to come the other direction, or wait for a gap to exist, make eye contact, do whatever you need to do to make sure it's safe and cross that other one. So where you're out there today crossing 4 lanes of traffic, essentially unprotected, this is you're crossing 1 lane at a time, and you have all the facilities you need to make a good decision in order to do that.
And then the other benefit isn't is because a lot of them roundabouts, they pull the walk cross sections back further.
Yep.
So, in a standard intersection, you're right up in the intersection here. They kind of recess or everything back further
Yep.
and kind of help you out with, especially with the roundabout, put you back where there should be a gap of traffic.
Yep. Yeah, because they like having enough space for at least one vehicle to queue in case a pedestrian does block it. But yeah, to your point too, no one's gonna come flying around the corner as quickly as they would
Right
otherwise.
now, everybody's right up at that intersection.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then one of the other elements too is, so with the current situation that's out there, we talked about speeds. So people are on average traveling 35 miles an hour. With the roundabout, they're designed, as I mentioned, 15 to 25 miles per hour. So really as you tick up, every 5 miles per hour, you add the likelihood of a more serious injury crash increases significantly. So if you were to be hit at 15 miles per hour versus 30 versus 40, it's more of a lesser severe crash too. So that's one of the benefits of a roundabout as well. I wanted to talk about a real world example too. So we knew the hill was going to be a discussion point here. So we wanted to make sure that we looked into that. And I don't know if anyone in the room here has been to Watertown, Minnesota. So right at the base of the hill, this is a project that Bolton Mink helped out with as well. There's a roundabout that they put in back in 2016. We reached out to the community and talked to the city administrator, talked to the police chief and a few others too. And they haven't had any serious crashes at the intersection. So this one's been in 6+ years, and they've had 5 total crashes at the intersection, with two involving a southbound vehicle. So from a grade perspective, it's always tough in street view to see exactly how steep it is, but this is a steep hill, and it comes on you pretty quick. So from a stopping standpoint, I would say it's the equivalent of what you have here, maybe even a little more severe because it's shorter. And I believe it is a little bit more steeper too, but people find a way to navigate this one just fine. And again, I think as I mentioned, the fire chief we chatted with too, and there hasn't been any serious crashes at the intersection again, because it's lower speed and because the type of crashes that you have out here really promote a safer intersection. And then the last intersection was that signalized intersection. So just in looking to reduce some crossing distance and clean up some of the intersection here, we did remove that free right and provide, it still maintains those 2 westbound through lanes. The side streets are just single lane. Just with the signalized aspect of this, it provides dedicated movements to vehicles. So the queuing, it gets people in and out of the intersection pretty decently. We'll get into some comparisons, not as well as the roundabout, but it does push vehicles through the intersection. So just a little bit of intersection treatment to reduce crossing distance and try to make it a little bit safer. But that one came in at 1.7 million as well, just with the cost of the improvements you see there, along as well as the traffic signal.
So you're saying this would be a stoplight?
Correct.
Here.
Yep.
Okay. Signal, yeah.
Yep. So to throw a few tables at you here, talk about some comparisons from a traffic operations standpoint, looking at, so we have the existing conditions and we have the AM, school, and PM peak hours identified there, and we talked about level service before, A being good, F being bad. The existing conditions overall, the intersections are operating pretty well. I think we know that. The worst movements at the intersections, we talked about that no build condition, which is that side street stop has some difficult movements for people to get onto the intersection today during those different peak hours. We'd expect a signal to still have some of those issues just based off of the signal timing that's implemented out there, people waiting on the side streets to get on. The roundabout, we would expect to operate pretty well under existing conditions with level service A. So they do a nice job of keeping traffic moving. In 2045, so talking about those forecasted traffic numbers that we looked at, the overall no build, so if we didn't do anything, it was just still that side street stop, we'd see even those overall intersection operations begin to tick up, just because the level of delay on the side street, you can see that red, trying to pull on there starts to impact the overall function of the intersection. So that intersection does begin to break down as traffic grows out here. The signal still handles the would be still expected to be able to handle that increase in traffic, but again, similar to the previous, the roundabout does look to operate better than the no build or the signal alternatives. One nuance that I just wanted to show, I know we just showed roundabout, mini roundabout here, was that ellipse roundabout that we showed, kind of that stretched out one versus the standard roundabout. Just from an overall operations standpoint, the standard roundabout with that free right and kind of maintaining what's out there today from a geometry standpoint, those two lanes entering the intersection, it looks to function better than what that ellipse would just in that single lane, which is probably intuitive and makes sense. But with those two lanes, we would expect for that westbound approach, which is the one we're most concerned about, as we have that potential signal at Payne that we don't want backups pushing into that intersection, and that being kind of the worst movement at the intersection as well. Today, we would expect with these different treatments, average of with the roundabout, with the conventional roundabout, somewhere in the range of 1 to 2 vehicles queuing on average, with upwards of 5 to 6 during the worst times. And then with the ellipse, have somewhere in the range of 2 to 3 with somewhere in the range of 6 to 10 vehicles. So more queues and more delays with the ellipse roundabout, just because you have that single lane coming in and it doesn't move traffic quite as well through. So as we look forward to 2045, 20 years out, it's a ways, but again, it just kind of highlights how that the ellipse doesn't quite have the capacity of what the normal roundabout does. You can see with that ellipse, those I believe they're red numbers, 475 and 425, that queue does start to stretch out towards that adjacent intersection of Payne, where you do start to see some longer queues with the conventional roundabout, but with that free right, it pushes them back and essentially cuts that number in half or a third of what we'd see with the ellipse. So both function well, but that conventional roundabout does function a little bit better with that free right. Little comparison on intersection safety too. So we have a website that we look to. It's kind of a conglomeration of a bunch of crash data and studies that look at the safety of an intersection. So the no build intersection, or the no build, so it is existing side street stop, we'll call that the base. With a traffic signal, we'd expect a 56% reduction in crashes, and I know it's a very specific number, but that's just based off of the studies. A roundabout, a 72% decrease in crashes, and the mini roundabout, 26%. The mini is less than the normal roundabout, potentially because of the center median, but also because if you drive a mini roundabout, you can tell it's tighter, and your decision points that you need to make and the way you drive through it's a little bit different. A normal roundabout, you just look left, and you make sure as long as that person's not coming on you fast, you can get in just fine. A mini roundabout, depending on the size of it, you sometimes have to worry about the traffic coming at you too, because as they circle around, they can come on you a lot quicker than what you would have in a normal roundabout. So that adds to the decision making compared to a conventional roundabout. Yeah.
Jake, is the one out by Menards a regular roundabout?
Yep. So just a quick summary then of the non-motorized movement. So as we talked about, the ability of each of these intersection types to safely accommodate pedestrians across. You can see again a lot of green for the roundabout. So people are, again, it's a safe movement, cross one lane of traffic at a time. The signal, also another safe alternative. You have the hand comes up, it tells you to stop, or the walk comes up to tell you to go. Just a little bit longer delays there just because it's not instantaneous. When you press the button, oftentimes you have to wait a little bit for that cycle to kind of conclude and for your time to come up to cross the intersection. So still reasonable time to cross there. But the existing and no build, so with that side street stop, again, just crossing Center Street, that pedestrians do now and will continue to have difficulties finding safe gaps during these peak times.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If with the roundabout, the roundabout where the pedestrian passes further back, like Andy had mentioned, there would be no, where they'd have to push the button to cross there, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
No, so if you go to some roundabouts, you will see that. A lot of times those are put in at the multi-lane approaches. So say you have 2 lanes entering or exiting. It's called a multiple threat, where if you're pulling in and the first person stops for that pedestrian trying to cross the intersection and you think you're safe to go, but that second one doesn't see you as you're blocked, they can cruise through and cause some issues. So sometimes they like to put the flashers up at those intersections just because it's an added level of safety. Okay, I see lights. There's likely a pedestrian. I'm going to look out and try to stop. But these are usually so straightforward and sight lines are clean. They're usually left out.
Mr. Chair, commission members, if, once, whatever the commission decides to recommend, that could always be something that could be a recommendation at the time of project design or something like that as well. So if that's,
Okay.
that's kind of more of a detailed design than what we're talking about today, but that is certainly something that could be considered at a future date.
All right, and then covering just a benefit cost analysis here. So we do like to look at this just from an overall cost versus benefit. So safety benefit, it's a calculation of value of life and cost of a crash to the human life. So safety benefit is computed there just with those safety crash reductions that we observed. The delay benefit is also noted based off of some calculations we complete, and you can see the signal takes a big hit from the delay benefit just because it's still expected to be overall delays at the intersection because the signal would stop that mainline traffic in situations where the side street needs to approach, where today it has a complete through movement. So that's where that has that negative benefit there. So that safety benefit plus the delay benefit divided by the cost. So each of these has benefit costs below 1. That doesn't mean they're a bad project. We still have issues that look to be remedied out here. But just if competitive funding or other elements were sought out here, it would be more of a proactive approach, I guess, to safety rather than a reactive, where the crashes don't necessarily indicate due to the severity of them that a solution or a change is needed immediately, although we do see some red flags. I don't intend to read every number on this, but here's a big detailed evaluation matrix, and if you want to peek back at the presentation after, feel free. Others, we can share some specifics, but I think just looking at colors here on overall benefits, you can see that the roundabout is the highest cost, but does have a lot of benefits as you go deeper into the table there. And for pedestrian effectiveness and accommodating speed reduction, crash reduction, overall level of service, things like that. The no build clearly has a lot of red checks against it. But overall, we just wanted to, I guess, as a technical analysis, start to put all these different aspects together so we can make a well-rounded decision on what the recommendation was out here. And with that, the recommendation that we have for a staff recommendation is that conventional single lane roundabout from the various elements that we talked about. So while it does have larger impacts to Harmon Park and some impacts to the Brown County Human Services, both of those are public properties essentially, and it didn't sound like on initial blush that it should be too significant of an issue to acquire right away as needed. At least it's not private property, which makes it a little bit of an easier task if that route were gone down. Is there any questions? Otherwise, all I have is next steps to report on.
Yeah, well, the only questions I would have is I agree with, the recommendations and then a lot of the figures that are in there that the full roundabout would be the best. I would ask the two questions I've got on that is, because the city owns the park on either side, because I had some, already brought up the tunnel thing, but after the last meeting, I asked, that was a thought in my head. And I was just waiting for our next meeting to say, because there is that change in elevation, is it possible, to get that tunnel in there under the large hill? For safety factor, because you have your recessed back, crossings that they could easily get over there and come in there. It might hurt some of the, sand volleyball court, because you might impede it some more. But again, city-owned and maybe worth the salvage of that. And then the other thing is, is there a benefit to, if you've got the soft right coming in and turning off a center on the garden, does that make sense to alleviate some traffic to, because that's city-owned land again, to put a soft right coming down the hill onto Garden to soften some of that, also alleviate some of your backup potential at the stop sign, because now you're letting that traffic that wants to go right out of there a little quicker. Those are two of my questions.
Yeah.
Again, it'll add some costs, but there might be some more safety wins
Yep.
overall.
Yep.
And overall flow in the long grand scheme of things. So,
Yeah, I can address those. Joe, I don't know if you have any initial thoughts. Otherwise,
Mr. Chair, Commission members, initial thoughts, pedestrian tunnel, anything's possible with the funds. I think it is it possible? Certainly it's possible. I think it would be worthy of if we as a commission, elect to go forward with a full roundabout. I think that can certainly be analyzed and seeing what that cost benefit would be of putting that tunnel in. The free right, just so I understand, Andy, is coming down the hill, free
down the
right
hill.
onto southbound Garden Street.
because there's a lot of times, if anyone's trying to enter off a summit,
Yep.
that traffic, on school days,
Yep,
coming
just
down the hill,
comes
but
and
it
goes,
also
yeah.
backs it up in that intersection, and most of the people that are coming down the hill, there's a fair amount of them, I'm sure, based on the study during school hours, morning, they're taking that right away to get their kids over there, because those are all the dumps now in both St. Paul and, Jefferson over there in the high school. Everything's dumping on that side. There's very little.
Yep.
As
far as obviously property acquisition standpoint, being that it's city-owned, I don't see that being an issue. There would be the question of utility relocation and things like that
Right.
for the electric and communications that may have pedestals and things in that area. And then, obviously, dealing with the slopes might require another retaining wall. And we'd have to look at the impacts because this picture doesn't show the parking lot.
Right.
Yep, in the pond area.
Yeah,
So
and that's
those
why
would be impacts that we'd have to look at. Maybe we could fly it and get a new aerial to see what those impacts would be. Certainly, both of those would not be out of the
Right.
question. So
It's just one of those things, if you're gonna spend, 2.4, and let's say now.
maybe we spend 4 and.
Yeah, maybe you spend 4, but over, the years of service, it's the
Right.
cheapest now once you got it dug up.
Yep.
So labor's not getting any cheaper, nor is engineering or anything else, so.
the one thing I'll offer on that is, and we can definitely dig into a bit more, is just trade-offs.
Right.
Everything we do on here has trade-offs, right?
Right.
So in looking at that approach, I think we'll look at that volume and we'll look long-term on what the benefits are of that from an operational perspective. The other side of it that we need to look at is pedestrian safety as well. So anytime you introduce another lane for pedestrian to cross, you're adding more conflict too. So you would be introducing a free right in another location for a person to cross a lane of traffic. So not to say that the free right isn't the better option, but I think it's something that we need to weigh here, just from an
'Cause
overall
my thought is
perspective.
with the recessed back crossings that maybe, that car is advanced enough that they can clear it. And plus that, if you think of the trucks coming down the hill, again, that gets them cars out of there quicker and lets
Yep.
that truck just clear with a little less risk
Yep.
involved
Nope.
coming down the hill.
That's fair. Okay. Yeah, and I think from the underpass perspective too, Joe, we can dig a little bit into that too, and just concept-wise how that fits as well. I think we have some room in what we're doing to do an evaluation of
Yeah,
that.
yeah, again, it would be concept level because
Yep.
we'd have to, there's multiple utilities we'd have to look at and things like that, but
Exactly.
yeah, from a
Yeah,
concept
it's just-
perspective, yeah.
I say it's just an ask, because if you're at this point, again, I agree with what staff has recommended, and I, definitely say the full roundabout is the right way to look at it, for the money value and the safety value and overall flow. But just a few more asks, just
Yep.
for perspective.
Yep. Oh, I appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? All right. So next steps of what we're looking at is looking to share these with the public. And we'll find a way to get these posted. And again, as we did with the existing conditions, allowing people to comment on them and provide their input. So we can weave that into decision making too. So it's a well-rounded recommendation here. So that'll be next. So we'll work on those steps, and then looking a little bit further out, we are pulling together the intersection control evaluation report. So that's our formal document that summarizes everything that we chatted about today, along with that recommendation. So we're actively working on that. So the draft report we're hoping to have together by August 14th, provide for comment and turn around a final report by September 15th. And then we would be coming back to you all again on potentially October 5th with a final recommendation that incorporates the final public input, what we've heard today, and some other items. And then following that up with a series of meetings with the New Ulm City Council on October 17th potentially, and then the Brown County Commission as well. That's all I have.
You did well.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. All right. Any more discussion on this? Okay, do we want to consider making a recommendation, or do we need more time to evaluate?
My recommendation would be go with the continued cost study on the full roundabout. There's just enough good information in there that says for the cost and the longevity of it, it is the safest route and probably causes, the best flow of traffic overall for pedestrians and, vehicle users of it. So I would recommend that full roundabout.
Mr. Chair, Commission members, I think today we're looking, ultimately, it'd be ideal if we could get a preferred alternative recommendation. Again, we are still in the preliminary stages of this. This will come back and you'll be able to make your formal recommendation as well. That would go to the City Council, but I think we're looking for that recommendation today that we can have Bolton and Mink kind of hone in on and concentrate more of their efforts as they move this forward, keeping in mind that all these alternatives will remain as alternatives as the final report is completed and whatnot with the ICE study. And I think all the alternatives will still be presented in the future, but this would kind of give Bolton and Mink that direction and how you want, what the preference would be to fine tune things as they go forward and come up with more detailed concept design. So,
Okay, cool. Well, I agree with Andy. That should be our preferred alternative.
I do too.
I agree. I don't have the engineering background, but it had more green on it.
Green, right?
Okay. Do we need to make an official with a vote?
You want a motion on that? Joey?
that would be
Okay,
nice,
Okay,
yes.
I'll make the motion to continue to proceed as a recommendation of the full roundabout.
I second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second to make that the full roundabout be our preferred alternative. Any more discussion? Otherwise, all in favor, say aye.
I
Opposed? That is our recommendation now. All right, thank you very much for the presentation. That was good. Next up, that's your only agenda item, I guess. So, our next meeting is scheduled to be August 3rd, and being no more business, I think we can call the meeting adjourned.
Now I have